Billionaire Margaret walked into one of her own diners undercover to find out why employees were quitting that location one after another. But instead of lazy staff, she found an 18-year-old waiter quietly doing everything he could to serve customers well. Moments later, however, she watched the manager fire him on the spot after revealing that he had hidden his feverish little brother in the storage room because he had no one else to care for him. Watching the boy walk out into the pouring rain with the sick child in his arms hit her deeply. So the billionaire decided to learn more about him, and when she discovered the heartbreaking truth about his life, she realized that what happened next could change both of their futures forever. Before we begin, remember this. While the story you're about to hear is fictional, the message behind it is very real. At Memory Stories, we believe the right story at the right moment can change a life. The morning rain drummed against the windshield of the rental sedan as Margaret Holloway sat in the parking lot of Clayton's Diner, watching the early shift filter in through the front door. At 57 years old, she had learned that the truth of any business lived in its details, the ones that never made it into quarterly reports or executive summaries. She adjusted the rearview mirror and studied her reflection. The expensive salon blowout had been deliberately roughed up with a spritz of water and a few careless passes of her fingers. The $700 blazer had been left hanging in the hotel closet, replaced by a faded gray zip-up she'd found on a Goodwill rack 2 towns over. Her diamond stud earrings sat locked in the hotel safe, replaced by a pair of small plastic hoops from a bin near the register. To anyone looking, she was just another middle-aged woman killing a rainy morning over a hot cup of coffee, invisible in the way that people who don't look important often are, which suited her purposes exactly. Margaret had built Holloway Hospitality Group from a single roadside breakfast spot 27 years ago into a collection of 27 diners and casual restaurants spread across 6 states. The business philosophy that had carried her through those decades was simple, almost embarrassingly plain: take better care of your lowest paid employee than you do of your most important customer. It was a lesson she had first glimpsed at 9 years old, watching her mother press her last few folded bills into the hands of a gas station attendant who had helped push their broken-down station wagon off a highway shoulder in the middle of a November storm. Grace Holloway had nothing to spare that night. She gave it anyway. But the woman who had truly shaped everything that followed, who had taken that seed of her mother's example and watered it into something that could actually grow, was Eleanor Marsh. Eleanor had owned a small hotel in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she had found Margaret at 17, sleeping on a bench outside a bus terminal, with a backpack that held everything she owned and nowhere in the world to go. Instead of calling security, Eleanor had brought her inside, fed her a hot meal, given her a clean room, and offered her a housekeeping job the very next morning. People don't fail because they don't try, Eleanor had told her that first night, pressing a warm mug of tea into her cold hands. People fail because the world doesn't give them a fair shot. All you need is one person willing to bet on you. Margaret had spent the next 10 years learning everything she could: housekeeping, then front desk work, then food service at a diner 2 blocks from Eleanor's hotel, then bookkeeping, then management. Eleanor had pointed her toward every opportunity and pushed her through every door Margaret had been too uncertain to open herself. By 27, Margaret had saved enough to put a deposit on a small breakfast spot outside Atlanta, and Holloway Hospitality Group had begun. Eleanor had been gone for 9 years now. But every decision Margaret made, every policy she set, every person she hired, every restaurant she walked into unannounced in a Goodwill jacket with a cracked plastic watch on her wrist, was still shaped by those words: all you need is one person willing to bet on you. Her mother, Evelyn, who was 82 years old and had opinions about everything and the complete fearlessness to share them, had said something similar in her own way once. The only thing you ever really own in this life, Evelyn had told her, is what you decide to do when somebody needs help, and you're the one standing there. Margaret had been 23 when Evelyn said that, sitting at her kitchen table in Charlotte after a long shift, she had written it on a napkin and carried it in her wallet for 2 years before she finally believed it enough not to need the reminder. The quarterly report on the passenger seat told her that Clayton's Diner had lost 14 employees in the past 7 months. 14 out of a total staff of 32. Numbers never lied, but they never told you why either. For the why, you had to show up in person, Margaret grabbed her worn canvas tote bag and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked through her jacket immediately. Good. A woman in a cashmere coat would be remembered. A woman getting rained on was just scenery. The diner's interior was exactly what she had expected from the financials. Scuffed linoleum, worn pale gray along the high traffic paths between the kitchen and the tables. Vinyl booths patched with electrical tape, where the stuffing had finally given up. The deep, layered smell of coffee and bacon grease, that no amount of cleaning could fully remove the smell of a place that had been alive and working for a very long time. The kind of place where people came because it was affordable and filling, not because they had other choices. But it was her place. Her name was on the lease, on the license, on the incorporation documents, and that meant whatever happened inside it was her responsibility. "Sit anywhere you like, Han," called out a server in her 50s, her voice carrying the particular warmth of someone who had been doing this work long enough to mean it without having to try. Margaret chose a corner booth with clean sightlines to the kitchen, passed through the front register, and the full sweep of the floor. She pulled a worn paper back from her tote and propped it open, the body language of someone who intended to linger. The morning rush arrived like a wave. The door chimed constantly. Construction workers with muddy boots, office workers in damp blazers, grabbing food to go regulars who slid into their usual seats without looking at the menu. The noise level rose steadily. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the flat-top grill, the printer spitting out tickets in the kitchen. That was when she noticed the boy. He couldn't have been more than 18, maybe 19 at the outside. Slim, with close-cropped dark hair, and the kind of face that was still deciding what it was going to be when it finished growing up. His name tag read Caleb in careful blue marker, and he was working a section of 7 tables with a focused, quiet efficiency that made Margaret set down her paperback and pay closer attention. He caught a water glass before it tipped off a tray, a reflexive, no drama, save that nobody else even noticed. He talked a flustered customer down from a complaint about overcooked eggs, not with empty apologies, but with a calm, specific explanation and a replacement plate that arrived before the man had fully stopped frowning. He made change in his head with no calculator, recited an order back to a table of 4 from memory, without writing a single word down, and simultaneously kept one eye on the adjacent section, the one that was not his, making small, quiet adjustments. When a table there went too long without water, he was covering for someone. Margaret could see it immediately. He was doing his own job and a piece of someone else's at the same time, and he was doing it without calling attention to it, without complaint, without slowing down. What she also noticed, and could not entirely account for, was the way he disappeared into the back of the restaurant at irregular intervals. Not long absences, never more than 3 or 4 minutes, but they had a particular quality to them. He always checked the floor, first made sure his tables were settled, and then slipped through the door to the storage area, with the careful timing of someone managing something he did not want noticed. And when he came back out, his face was always arranged a fraction too deliberately into professional neutrality, the careful expression of a person who had been doing something other than restocking supplies. At the 20-minute mark, Caleb disappeared into the back storage area again. Through the pass-through window, Margaret could see the other servers scrambling slightly to cover his section. A young woman with long gel nails rolled her eyes at a coworker and muttered something that made them both smirk. 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, Margaret had been watching the clock. Caleb came back out. His face was carefully arranged into professional neutrality, his apron straightened with a little too much precision, but she could see what he was working to conceal, the slight redness around his eyes, the determined set of his jaw that said he was holding himself together through pure force of will. He had been in there, trying not to cry. Margaret was still piecing together what she was observing when the office door at the back of the diner swung open, hard enough to rattle the coat hooks bolted to the wall beside it. "Brooks!" The voice cut through the full noise of the morning rush like a blade. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Even the sizzle from the flat-top grill seemed to quiet for a moment. The man who came out was somewhere in his late 40s, broad through the middle, with the particular expression of someone who had spent years enjoying the fact that other people had to listen to him. His polo shirt pulled tight across his stomach. His name tag read, R. Dunbar Manager, in embossed plastic. He moved across the floor with the swagger of someone who believed authority was something you wore rather than something you earned. His eyes locked on Caleb with a contempt that was not fresh. This was contempt that had been building for a while and was finally getting its moment. "Brooks, what in the world do you think you're doing back there?" Caleb turned. His face went pale, but his voice stayed level. "Mr. Dunbar, I was just checking on. You were abandoning your section during the morning rush. Do you have any idea what's going on out here? Tables going unserved, customers waiting. You think this place runs itself?" Margaret looked around the dining room. No, customers appeared distressed. The section that was technically Caleb's had been covered smoothly enough that most people probably had not noticed he had stepped away. This was not a manager correcting a real problem. This was performance pure and deliberate. "Sir, I was gone less than 4 minutes. Jenny and Marcus covered 25 minutes. Dunbar's voice climbed higher, his face flushing red. "You've been disappearing all morning. You think I haven't been watching? That's not accurate. Don't you tell me what's accurate in my own restaurant." He stepped forward into Caleb's personal space, close enough that the nearest customers physically shifted in their seats. "I know exactly what you've been doing. I know about your little brother. I know you've got him stashed in my storage room like this is some kind of nursery. You think I'm blind?" The dining room had gone completely silent. Caleb's voice dropped low and urgent. "Mr. Dunbar, please. Can we take this to your office, please?" "Oh, now you want to do this quietly. Now you want privacy." Dunbar's volume went up instead of down, making absolutely certain the room could hear every word. "You brought a sick child into a food service establishment. Do you know what the health department says about that? Do you know what our liability looks like right now because of what you decided to do this morning? Mr. Dunbar, you want to explain yourself? Fine. Tell everyone here why you thought this was acceptable." Caleb's composure cracked just for a fraction of a second, a single flinch before he pulled himself back together. "My brother has a fever of 102. The school called me at 5:45 this morning. Our aunt is 73 years old and she doesn't drive. She lives 40 minutes away. I called 4 different people and nobody could come on short notice. I don't have a car." His voice caught on the next words just slightly. "Our parents are gone. There is nobody else. I couldn't leave him home alone and I couldn't miss today. This would be my 3rd absence this month, and you made it very clear that 3 absences meant automatic termination. He is in the far back corner of the storage room, nowhere near the food prep area. I made absolutely certain of that. I just needed to get through today." Margaret had set down her paperback entirely. Near the window, an older woman in a rain jacket had stopped eating and was watching Dunbar with an expression that was not friendly. Margaret's first instinct was to stand up immediately. She was already half out of her seat, and then Dunbar spoke again, his voice louder now, his posture making clear he had no intention of checking on anyone. "I don't care what you made sure of." Dunbar crossed his arms, something almost satisfied moving through his expression. "You brought a sick minor into my establishment without permission. That is a health code violation. That is a liability issue. That is grounds for immediate termination." He paused for effect. "Caleb Brooks, you're fired. Effective right now. Collect your belongings. Get your brother and get out of my restaurant." The silence was complete. Even the kitchen had gone still. "Mr. Dunbar," Caleb's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Please, we need today's pay. I have groceries. You should have thought about that before you decided to run a babysitting operation on company time. 5 minutes to clear out. If you're still here in 6 minutes, I'm calling the police." Caleb stood motionless for a long moment, then with his chin at exactly the level it had been before he walked toward the back of the restaurant with the careful dignity of someone who has decided that this is the one thing he will not let them take from him. He came out less than a minute later, carrying the little boy. Margaret had not known what to expect. What she saw stopped her cold. The child was small, 7 years old at the most, slight and dark-haired, like his brother. He was bundled in a school hoodie that was far too thin for the weather outside, and his head rested on Caleb's shoulder with the complete bonelessness of a sick kid who had given up trying to hold himself upright. His cheeks were deeply flushed, his eyes barely open, his whole body radiating the particular stillness of a fever that had taken all the fight out of him. He looked very small in his brother's arms. From the booth near the window, The older woman said clearly, and without hesitation, "Somebody ought to be ashamed of themselves." She was not looking at Caleb when she said it. "His name is Danny," Caleb said quietly to the room, to no one, to everyone. "He's 7. He doesn't like loud noises when he has a fever." He walked past Dunbar without looking at him, past the servers, some of whom stared at the floor, past the customers who had gone very still in their seats, past Margaret's corner booth. For just a second, as he passed, their eyes met. Before we go any further, if this story is hitting close to home, take a moment right now to like this video. It tells us you're here, and it helps someone else who needs this story find it today. Now, what do you think Margaret is going to do next? Leave your answer in the comments. We read every single one. In that brief, unguarded moment, Margaret saw everything laid plain. The fear of someone too young to be carrying this weight. The bone-deep exhaustion of a person who had been holding things together by sheer will for longer than anyone should have, to the desperate quiet terror of someone watching the one fragile structure of stability they had managed to build begin to come apart. It was the look she had seen on her own face 40 years ago in a bus terminal bathroom mirror in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Caleb pushed through the front door into the rain, which had picked up again, coming down in heavy sheets. He had no umbrella, no car. He tucked Danny's head more securely under his chin and started walking east toward the cheaper side of town, and the rain soaked through both of them within seconds. Margaret stood, put a $10 bill on the table, and picked up her tote. But she did not follow him out into the rain. Instead, she walked directly across the dining room floor to where Dunbar stood, near the register, wearing the expression of a man who believed he had just handled something correctly. "Excuse me," Margaret said. Her voice was pleasant, unhurried, and completely level. Dunbar barely glanced at her. "Someone will be with you in just a minute, ma'am. I don't need service. I need your full name and your official title at this location." He looked at her, then taking in the rain-damp zip-up, the plastic earrings, the canvas tote. His expression placed her in a category and found her unimportant. "Raymond Dunbar, manager. If you have a complaint about what just happened, there's a customer feedback form on our website." Raymond Dunbar. Margaret said it the way a person says a name when confirming it against a document. Manager at Clayton's Diner, employed by Holloway Hospitality Group for 8 years. Transferred here from the Macon location 2 years ago, and from the Savannah location before that. 14 employee separations at this location in the past 7 months. She paused. "Do those numbers sound accurate to you?" The color left Dunbar's face quickly and completely. "Who are you?" Margaret reached into her tote and produced her real wallet. The slim leather one with her real cards and her real identification. She set her business card on the counter between them and watched him read it. "Margaret Holloway, I own this company." She let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. "You are terminated effective immediately. My HR director is being contacted right now and will reach you within the hour regarding your final pay and the appropriate paperwork. I'd like you to leave the premises now. You can't just, I have rights. There are procedures. There are procedures for a great many things, including the documentation of a pattern of abusive conduct across multiple locations that should have resulted in your termination years ago, rather than repeated transfers." Margaret's voice remained perfectly quiet throughout all of this. Somehow, that made it worse. "Leave now, Mr. Dunbar. Quietly, please." He left. Not quietly. He grabbed his jacket from the office, and the back door banged hard enough behind him that several customers flinched. Margaret turned to the stunned staff. "Who is the assistant manager here?" A woman in her early 40s raised her hand slowly, like she was not entirely sure this moment was real. "That's me. Linda Crawford. Ms. Crawford, you're interim manager as of right now. I'll have someone from corporate reach you within the hour. Can you keep the restaurant running through the rest of today's service?" "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." "Good. Everyone else back to work. I'm sorry for the disruption." Margaret walked back to her booth, sat down, and picked up her phone. She had calls to make, a termination to process, a personnel file to untangle, and an HR director to have a very uncomfortable conversation with before the end of the day. But for a long moment, she made none of those calls. She sat still and watched the rain running down the windows, and thought about a boy walking east in that rain with his sick little brother pressed against his chest, and about Eleanor Marsh, and about the only real way to honor a debt like the one she carried. Then she picked up her phone and started dialing. Margaret sat at the small desk in her hotel room, with her reading glasses on, and her laptop opened the phone on speaker, as Barbara Nolan, her executive assistant, of 12 years, the most efficient human being Margaret had ever encountered, walked her through what she had compiled in 3 hours. Caleb James Brooks, age 18. Barbara began, her voice crisp and precise. Hired 11 weeks ago as a server at Clayton's Diner. No disciplinary record prior to this week. 2 write-ups for tardiness, both issued within the past 9 days, both signed by Dunbar. He was building a paper trail, Margaret said. That's exactly how it reads. Caleb graduated from Millbrook High School last June honor roll, which is notable, given everything else that was happening in his life at the time. He submitted applications to 2 community college programs in the spring, but withdrew both before the enrollment deadline. He withdrew them himself. Thomas and Renee Brooks were, yes, in writing approximately 3 weeks after his parents' accident. The withdrawal letters are dated the last week of April. The hotel room went quiet. Tell me about the accident, Margaret said. Thomas and Renee Brooks were killed in a 2-vehicle collision on Route 41 this past March. Thomas was 44. Renee was 42. Barbara paused. At the time of the accident, Caleb was 17 years old and finishing his senior year of high school. Daniel Danny was 6 years old. He turned 7 in May. Caleb was 17 when it happened. Yes, he turned 18 in late April, approximately 6 weeks after the accident. He had already submitted the college withdrawal letters before his birthday. Barbara's voice carried the specific flatness of professional composure over genuine concern. He filed for legal guardianship of Daniel the same week he turned 18. Courts, in that jurisdiction, can initiate emergency protective arrangements for minors whose siblings are nearly of legal age. Danny was placed with a neighbor family on a temporary basis from March until the formal guardianship was finalized in late May. Caleb graduated in June and began applying for full-time work immediately. Clayton's hired him 11 weeks ago. Margaret set down her pen. So the sequence is accident in March. Caleb turns 18 in April and files for guardianship immediately. Guardianship finalized in May. Caleb graduates in June, starts work at Clayton's in late June or early July. That is the sequence, yes. He has been an adult, a legal guardian, and a full-time worker for approximately the same length of time, about 4 months. He's 18 years old and he has been holding all of that at once for 4 months. Yes. Margaret looked out the hotel window at the rain-wet parking lot below. 4 months. The same length of time it sometimes took her senior managers to learn a new inventory software system. What does his financial situation look like? Stretched thin, from what I can piece together through public records. He is current on rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in the Eastfield area of town. He needed 2 bedrooms for Danny, which pushed him into a higher price bracket than he would have chosen for himself alone. No vehicle registered in his name, almost no credit history, which is expected at his age. He applied for state assistance when the guardianship was granted and was denied on a technicality related to his age and employment classification. He is currently in the appeals process, which moves slowly. Family support limited. His father's older sister, Patricia Brooks, is 73 years old and lives in Harborview, approximately 40 minutes away without a car. No driver's license on record. His mother's family appears to be in Ohio. There may be some estrangement, though I cannot confirm details from public records. A pause. There is essentially no support network available to him on short notice, Ms. Holloway. Everything he told Mr. Dunbar this morning was accurate. I know, Margaret said. I could hear it. One more thing. His employment application has a section for additional notes. He wrote, I am the legal guardian of my minor brother Daniel Brooks, age 7. I am a reliable and committed employee. I ask only for reasonable consideration on school pickup days, when possible. That's all. No explanation of circumstances, no request for sympathy. Just the fact and the ask. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, pull Dunbar's full file, everything, not just the official record, every complaint, every incident, everything that was reported and not acted on. Already done. Sending it now. There are 7 documented complaints from employees across 3 locations, all marked resolved with no formal disciplinary action. 3 of those employees left within 30 days of filing. The pattern is consistent across all 3 locations, public confrontations. Scheduling used as punishment, creating conditions designed to make people quit, rather than addressing actual management failures. Barbara paused. Someone in HR has been facilitating the transfers rather than addressing the conduct. I've flagged the name. Send everything. Margaret spent the next hour and 40 minutes reading through Dunbar's file. By the time she finished, her coffee had gone cold. 4 pages of the hotel notepad were full, and she knew 2 things with absolute certainty. First, Dunbar should have been gone from this company years ago. Second, that failure was only the beginning of what needed to be fixed. She also knew something else, something that had been forming at the edges of her thinking since she watched a boy walk east in the rain carrying his sick little brother. She picked up her phone and dialed the number in Caleb's employment file. It rang twice. Hello. Young, cautious, carrying the wariness of someone who has learned that answered phones often bring complicated news. Caleb, my name is Margaret Holloway. I own Holloway Hospitality Group, which operates Clayton's Diner. I was at the restaurant this morning and I witnessed what happened. I'd like to speak with you if you're willing. A silence. 5 full seconds. Is this about something legal? Because I didn't do anything wrong. Danny was nowhere near the food preparation area. You are not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. Mr. Dunbar has been terminated and will not be returning to that restaurant. Margaret kept her voice steady and unhurried. I would like to meet with you in person tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock at the diner, if that works for you. I want to hear your story, and I'd like to discuss whether there's something I can do to make this right. No obligations, no strings, just a conversation. Another silence, longer this time. Why would you want to do that? Because what happened to you this morning was wrong, and because someone did something similar for me a long time ago when I was young and had nothing and nowhere to go, and I have spent every year since trying to be worthy of what she gave me. Margaret paused. I hope you'll come. Quiet on the line. Then, okay, 2 o'clock. After she hung up, Margaret opened a new document on her laptop and began a different kind of list. Not about Dunbar, not about HR failures, but about Holloway Hospitality Group's own support systems. The Employee Support Fund, 7 years old, genuinely funded, genuinely useful. The Child Care Partnership Network, the Emergency Assistance Provisions, the Tuition Reimbursement Program. How many people at Clayton's Diner knew any of it existed? She stared at the question for a long time before she started writing the answer. Caleb arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, holding Danny by the hand. The little boy was visibly better than the day before, still pale around the edges, still moving with the careful economy of a child conserving energy, but with color back in his face, and enough brightness in his eyes to suggest the worst had passed. He was wearing a clean shirt and carrying a small plastic dinosaur in his free hand, with the focused grip of a child who goes nowhere without his most important possession. Margaret was already in the booth. She stood as they came in. Caleb, thank you for coming. She looked down. And who is this? My brother Danny, Caleb said with a quiet steadiness that told Margaret a great deal about how he had spent the past 4 months. Hi, Danny. She studied the dinosaur. That is a very impressive one. What kind is it? Danny held it up with great seriousness. Carnotaurus. They have horns on their forehead and really small arms, even smaller than a T-Rex's. I did not know that. Most people don't, Danny said gravely, as though this were an ongoing problem he had accepted he could not fully solve. Margaret had arranged for hot chocolate and crackers to be waiting. Danny was settled in the corner of the booth within 30 seconds, his Carnotaurus propped against the sugar dispenser, and he set about the crackers with the focused appetite of a child whose fever had broken and whose stomach had remembered it existed. Margaret and Caleb settled across from each other. Mr. Dunbar is no longer with the company, she began. That is permanent. What he did yesterday, the public nature of it, the way he spoke to you, firing you for trying to take care of your family, that violated everything this company is supposed to stand for. She met his eyes directly. I also want to tell you that I reviewed your employment file and looked at some public records this morning. I know about your parents, Caleb. I am very sorry. Something moved through his face. Not quite pain, not quite relief, more like the expression of someone who is braced for impact and encounters unexpectedly something that does not require bracing against. You looked into me. I needed to understand your situation before I came to you, because I wanted to make a real offer, not a gesture. She held his gaze. I watched you work for 90 minutes yesterday morning before the incident with Dunbar. The way you manage your section, handle complaints, anticipate what people need before they ask, that does not come from training. That is instinct and intelligence. You were also covering part of another server's section simultaneously without being asked, and without calling attention to it. In 27 years of running restaurants, I can tell you that is genuinely rare. Caleb waited. His expression said he was listening for the thing that came after the compliment. I would like to offer you the assistant manager position at this location, Margaret said. You would work under Linda Crawford, who is being promoted to full manager. The salary is $37,000 a year, with full benefits health coverage for you and Danny dental vision, and paid time off. After 3 to 6 months learning our systems, you would be eligible for promotion to full manager. Our benefits package also includes tuition reimbursement for courses related to your role. She slid the folder across the table. Caleb looked at the folder. He did not open it. He sat back slightly and looked at Danny, who was absorbed in his hot chocolate and his crackers, and his dinosaur completely unaware of the conversation happening across the table. Caleb watched his brother for a long moment, the flushed cheeks still fading the way Danny held the Carnotaurus, even while he ate, like letting go of it might cause something to go wrong. When Caleb looked back at Margaret, something had shifted in his face. The careful composure had given way to something more raw and more honest. I appreciate what you were trying to do, he said. I really do, but I cannot take this. Margaret had not expected that. She kept her expression neutral. Tell me why. Because assistant manager means longer hours. It means staying late when something goes wrong. It means being the person who gets called when a shift falls apart at 11 at night. He shook his head slightly. I cannot afford any of that. I get Danny up at 6:15 every morning. I walk him to school. I come to work, I get him from school, I make dinner, I help with homework. I get him to bed, and then I set everything up for the next morning. His voice was controlled, but the exhaustion underneath it was real and unguarded. That is the day. Every single day. There is no room in that for more responsibility. If I take a position like this and I start dropping things at work or at home, Danny pays for it. He has already lost everything. I will not let him lose the one thing he still has, which is me being there. The tuition reimbursement. I had to let that go. He said it plainly, without self-pity, which somehow made it harder to hear. I withdrew my college applications before my birthday. Danny needed stability more than I needed college. That is the math, and I made peace with it. He looked at her steadily. I am grateful for what you are offering, Ms. Holloway. I mean that sincerely. But the right answer for me right now is a job I can do well and still be home by 6. This is not that job. Danny looked up from his hot chocolate. Caleb, can I have another cracker? Yeah, buddy. Caleb slid the plate closer without looking away from Margaret. The dinosaur wants one too, Danny said. The dinosaur can have half of yours. Danny considered this with great seriousness. Okay, that is fair. Margaret watched this small exchange, the automatic ease of it, the way Caleb tracked Danny, without making it look like tracking, the way Danny leaned slightly in his brother's direction, the way plants lean toward light, and she understood with complete clarity what she was actually looking at. This was not a boy who did not want opportunity. This was a boy who wanted it so badly that he had taught himself not to want it, because wanting things you have decided you cannot have is its own particular kind of ongoing grief. Can I tell you something? Margaret said. Sure. When I was 17 years old, I was living on a bus terminal bench in Chattanooga with a backpack and no plan. A woman named Eleanor Marsh found me and gave me a job and a place to stay. About 6 weeks after she hired me, she offered me a shift supervisor position. More hours, more responsibility, more pay. Caleb looked at her. I turned it down, Margaret said. I told her I wasn't ready, that I didn't want to risk losing what I already had, that it was too much, too fast. She paused. What I didn't say, what I barely admitted to myself, was that I was terrified. If I took on more and failed, I'd lose the only stable thing I'd found. I was protecting myself by staying small. That is not the same thing, Caleb said quietly. You were protecting yourself. I am protecting Danny. Yes. And I want you to think carefully about how similar those two things actually are. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Eleanor didn't argue with me when I refused. She just said, all right, come back to me when you're ready. And she kept the offer open. She paused. A few weeks later, I watched her spend an entire evening sorting through job applications for the front desk position she needed to fill. She interviewed 5 people. I watched her do it, and I thought I could do that better. I could see what she was looking for, and I could do it better than anyone she'd interviewed. And the only reason I was watching from the outside, instead of sitting in that chair, was because I had talked myself out of it. Margaret held his eyes. I went to her the next morning and told her I had changed my mind. Danny had set the Carnotaurus down on the table and was making it walk in slow, deliberate steps toward the edge, then walking it back. A small patrol, keeping order. I am not asking you to abandon your brother for a career, Margaret said. I am asking you to consider that there might be a version of this where you do not have to choose. She tapped the folder. Open it, please. Caleb opened it. She walked him through everything: the Employee Support Fund, the Child Care Partnership Network, the emergency assistance provisions, the specific dollar amounts and the specific programs, and the specific contacts. She was specific on purpose because vague reassurances meant nothing to someone who had learned the hard way that systems fail and promises evaporate. She wanted him to see the actual structure of it, the thing that existed and could be touched. The Child Care Partnership, Caleb said, reading one page carefully. This is real. 3 licensed providers within 2 miles of this location. Subsidized rates through the fund. Available for before and after school. And for mornings like yesterday, when the school calls at 5:45 with no warning. Caleb read the page again. Then he looked up at Danny. Hey, bud. Danny looked up from his dinosaur patrol. You remember Mrs. Patterson from the park? The one who always has the thermos of lemonade. Danny thought carefully. The one with the orange cat. That's her friend Gloria. Gloria takes care of kids after school. She has the cat. Danny processed this. What is the cat's name? I don't know yet. Bo. Danny seemed to feel this was a solvable but non-trivial problem. We should find out before we decide anything. That is a fair point, Caleb said. He looked back at Margaret. There was something different in his expression now, still cautious, still not fully convinced. But the door that had been firmly closed was open a crack. What if I take this and it falls apart in 3 weeks? What if you have misread this and I fail and Danny ends up in a worse position than he is right now? Then we figure out what went wrong and what you need. Maybe more training, maybe a different role, maybe something else entirely. I am not betting on perfection. Margaret met his gaze steadily. I am betting on the person I watched work yesterday morning. I am betting on someone who, when the worst possible thing happened to his family, did not leave. He stayed, and he figured it out one day at a time. She paused. Caleb, your father believed your real character is what you do when nothing is in it for you. Your mother believed the most important thing you can do is show up for the people who need you consistently, no matter what. She paused. Those 2 people raised you to do exactly what you are doing for Danny. I do not think they would call it selfish for you to also build something for yourself. I think they would call it exactly right. The silence stretched. Danny set the Carnotaurus very carefully in the center of the table, like placing a small ambassador at a negotiating summit. Caleb, he said. Yeah. Is this the lady who is trying to help us? Caleb looked at his brother. Yeah, she is. Danny looked at Margaret with the direct assessing gaze of a 7-year-old who takes important evaluations seriously. Okay, he said, apparently satisfied, and went back to his hot chocolate. Caleb watched him for a moment. Then he looked back at Margaret. If I take this and Danny needs me, if the school calls if he is sick, if something happens, you go, every single time, whatever it takes. I will put that in writing. I want to be home by 6:30 most nights. We will build the schedule around that as the baseline. I want to understand everything I am agreeing to before I agree to it. That is exactly the right instinct. Take the folder home. Read every word. Call me tomorrow with your questions. A pause. The cat's name, Danny said, without looking up from his hot chocolate. Both adults looked at him. We should really find out the cat's name first, Danny said reasonably. You are absolutely right, Margaret said. I will make it my first priority. Danny nodded, satisfied, and picked up the Carnotaurus again. Caleb looked at his brother for one more long moment. Then he straightened the folder, set it squarely in front of him, and extended his hand across the table. Okay, he said. I will try. Margaret shook his hand. That is all anyone can ever really do. She made one call before leaving the diner. Gloria Simmons confirmed that yes, she had availability for after-school care. And yes, the cat's name was Professor. And yes, she thought that was an excellent name for a cat of his particular dignity. Margaret relayed this information to Danny on her way out. Danny received the name Professor with visible satisfaction. "That is a good name," he said. "That is a very good name." "I thought you would approve," Margaret said. Monday arrived with clear Florida skies and dry warmth that felt like a reward after days of rain. Caleb stood outside Clayton's diner at 5:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before his official start time, in a new assistant manager polo with his name embroidered on the chest in navy thread. The weekend had moved at a speed that did not feel real. Caleb had read every word of the folder on Saturday night after Danny was asleep. He had called Margaret Sunday morning with 6 specific questions, all of which she answered specifically. By Sunday afternoon, Danny had met Gloria, properly discovered that Professor was an orange cat of considerable dignity, who permitted careful petting from people he had decided to trust, and had declared Gloria's apartment a good place on the grounds that she knew what a pachycephalosaurus was without being told. She knew the name and everything. Danny had reported on the drive home with the gravity of someone who has applied a rigorous screening process and found the candidate satisfactory. The health coverage was being processed on an emergency basis. The child care arrangement was confirmed. The Emergency Assistance Fund had approved a grant covering 2 months of rent. All of it was real, documented, specific. Caleb had checked everything twice because he had learned in 4 months that hope was most useful when it was also verifiable. He unlocked the door and went inside. Linda Crawford was already at the counter, reviewing the prep checklist with the focused efficiency of someone who ran her mornings to a precise clock. She looked up when he came in. Her expression was professionally neutral, the expression of someone who had decided to watch carefully before forming a judgment. Linda was 42 years old. She had been at Clayton's for 4 years, the last 2 of them functioning as assistant manager in everything but title, while Dunbar ran the location into the ground. She was organized, experienced, and deeply skilled at the actual work of running a restaurant. She was also someone who had been recommended for the full manager position twice by regional assessors, and blocked both times by Dunbar, for reasons that had nothing to do with her performance. When Linda had learned that an 18-year-old server was being placed above her as assistant manager, she had called Margaret directly and asked without preamble for an explanation. Margaret had taken the call. She had explained what she had seen, what she believed, and what she was asking Linda to do, not step aside for Caleb, but build something with him as his full manager, with the title and compensation she had always deserved. The call had lasted 40 minutes. Linda had not agreed to like the situation, but she had agreed to engage with it honestly, which was enough. The morning crew filtered in. The reactions were what Caleb had expected, some curious, some cautious, some openly skeptical. A woman named Sandra, who had been at Clayton's for 4 years, watched him with the measuring gaze of someone doing careful math. A younger server, named Brent, kept his expression deliberately flat. An older man named Earl, who worked the grill, said nothing and kept prepping his station with the focused efficiency of someone who considered this hour of the morning too valuable for unnecessary conversation. "Good morning," Linda said, cutting through the low murmur. "This is Caleb Brooks. He worked here as a server until last week. Starting today, he is our assistant manager, Caleb." Caleb stepped forward. He had been up until midnight going through different versions of what to say. Every version that sounded smooth or rehearsed felt wrong when he tested it against the reality of these people, all of whom had been here longer than he had, and had every right to be skeptical. He decided to just tell the truth. "I know this is strange," he said. "I know some of you watched what happened last Tuesday, and you have questions about how I ended up in this shirt. I am not going to pretend it makes perfect sense from where you are standing, because it does not." He looked around at all of them, meeting each set of eyes briefly. "What I can tell you is that I am going to work harder than anyone else in this building. I am going to get things wrong. When I do, I want to hear about it, because you know things about this place that I do not know yet, and I am going to need those things." He paused. "Give me 30 days. Watch what I actually do. Judge me on that." The silence that followed was the silence of people deciding. "Back to work," Linda said. "Caleb, you are with me." Opening walkthrough. The day was harder than he had expected. The physical demands were familiar. What was hard was the weight of constant observation, the awareness that every small decision he made was being silently evaluated by people who had not yet decided whether he had any business making decisions. Linda walked him through the opening procedures with efficient professionalism, and he took notes on everything, asking specific questions. Not how does this work, but why is it done this way rather than another way? And he could tell the specificity occasionally surprised her. During the rush, he moved carefully, watching more than directing. When orders backed up badly at the grill, he stepped in beside Earl, without being asked, and worked quietly under the older man's guidance. Earl said nothing for the first 8 minutes. He observed Caleb's technique with the flat, unhurried assessment of someone who has spent enough years at a grill to know immediately whether a person actually knows what they are doing or is performing competence. "Don't crowd it," Earl said finally. "Every piece needs its own space or nothing cooks right." "Got it, thank you." A pause, during which Earl flipped 3 eggs without looking at them. "My son," Earl said without particular emphasis. "He's about your age. Works over at the hardware place on Clement Street." A pause. "Good kid." Caleb understood this was not a non sequitur. He understood it was Earl's way of placing him in a category, not enemy, not friend, yet but something human and known. "What is his name?" "Marcus." "Is he good at the hardware business?" "Better than I would have been at his age," Earl said, which appeared to conclude the conversation. But something in the quality of the silence had shifted. Caleb made mistakes. He sent a food runner to the wrong table. He forgot a plate modification and had to remake it. He gave a customer the wrong change and was corrected by Sandra, who did it with pointed precision. When Sandra turned away after the correction, Caleb took one careful breath, reset himself, and kept moving. He did not make excuses. He did not look rattled. But Linda saw it. She caught his eye across the floor during a brief lull, gave him one small nod. Not approval, exactly, more like acknowledgement, and went back to what she was doing. It was the nod of someone who had noticed the effort and was keeping it in the account. After the morning rush cleared and the lunch crew arrived, Caleb gathered the morning staff. "Thank you for today. I slowed some of you down and I am going to get faster." He checked his phone where he had been keeping notes throughout the shift. "I also noticed things I want to address. Earl, you were compensating for your left leg by the end of the shift. How long has that been bothering you?" Earl looked up from cleaning his station, with the expression of a man who had not expected to be the subject of observation. "Few months, concrete floor. It is manageable. It should not have to be managed. Anti-fatigue mats for the grill and prep stations are a standard safety accommodation, and I am submitting that request to facilities today." He looked around the group. "The walk-in cooler door required my full shoulder to open this morning. That is a safety issue, and I am escalating it to facilities as urgent today, not adding it to a low priority queue." He looked at Linda. "Has that been flagged before?" "Several times. It has never moved up. It is moving up today." He looked around at the group. "What else is making your jobs harder that has not been addressed?" Silence. They were not ready to trust him yet. He was not expecting them to be. "Okay, thank you. I will see you tomorrow." As the group dispersed, Linda pulled him aside. "You did not get rattled," she said. "Not when Sandra corrected you. Not when Brent tested the boundaries on that table reassignment. You stayed even." "I wanted to get rattled," Caleb admitted. "I know. I could see the effort." She paused. "That is actually more impressive than if it had been easy." She handed him the facilities request form. "Show me how you write up the cooler. I want to see whether your instinct for what to emphasize matches what will actually get it prioritized." He wrote it up. She read it, made one suggestion about which specific code section to cite, and let him resubmit it. It was, he would realize later, the first lesson disguised as a correction offered without condescension. That night, after Danny was asleep, he had made a drawing at Gloria's of Professor the Cat, wearing a graduation cap, which both of them agreed was extremely accurate. Caleb sat at the kitchen table and made lists. Every employee's name and what he had observed. Things to follow up on tomorrow. One line at the bottom, underlined, "You made 3 mistakes today. Don't make the same ones twice." His phone buzzed. Unknown number, but he recognized the name and the signature. "How was day 1? Margaret Holloway." He stared at it for a moment, then typed, "Harder than almost anything I have done lately. But I think it is going to work." Her response came in under 2 minutes. "I never doubted it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is another day to prove it." Caleb set down his phone and looked around the kitchen of the apartment that was for the first time in 4 months actually stable. 29 days left in his self-imposed trial. He had survived harder things. The month moved the way months do when every single day contains enough for a week. Caleb arrived at 5:30 every morning. He stayed late when the schedule allowed, learning the evening operations, building relationships with the night crew, working every station in the diner, until he understood not just how but why and what could be improved. But it was Linda who shaped those 30 days more than anyone else, and not always gently. When he made a scheduling decision that seemed reasonable to him, she would wait until the staff meeting ended, and then walk him through, specifically, and without softening, exactly where the logic had failed, and why it would cause a problem on Thursday, even if it looked fine today. When he proposed a change to the prep checklist, she asked 6 precise questions about downstream consequences before she would support it. When he misread a customer situation and escalated unnecessarily, she debriefed him on it for 15 minutes in the back office with the direct, unsentimental precision of someone who believed that learning from mistakes was only valuable if the learning was thorough. "You could be easier on me," he said after one of those sessions. "I could," she agreed, straightening the papers on her desk with the careful precision that was her habit when choosing words. "I was easy on people for 2 years under Dunbar, because that was the only way to keep the peace. You know what easy got me 14 employees gone in 7 months, and a restaurant that was falling apart." She looked at him directly. "You have real instincts, Caleb. Real ones, not performed ones. If I treat those instincts like they don't need sharpening, I would be doing you a disservice, and I would be doing a disservice to everyone in this building who depends on you making good decisions." She handed him the next morning's prep report. "So no, I am not going to be easy on you. I am going to be useful to you. Those are different things." The anti-fatigue mats arrived on day 7. Earl stood on one during the morning shift and said nothing about it to Caleb. But Caleb noticed that by the end of the shift, Earl was moving differently, less careful with each step, less guardedly compensating for something he had been managing quietly for months. On day 21, a regular customer asked Earl how his leg was doing. Earl said better. Management finally got it sorted and went back to his grill. Caleb happened to be within earshot. He filed it away as the thing it was Earl's version of a thank you, offered in Earl's own language, on Earl's own timeline. The walk-in cooler door was fixed on day 9. The technician who came admitted the work order had been sitting in the queue for 4 months at low priority. "It is high priority now," Caleb said. It was fixed that afternoon. The employee meal policy was expanded on day 11. The previous policy allowed 1 discounted meal per shift, but buried the benefit in so many restrictions that most staff had stopped using it. The new policy was 1 full meal per shift, from whatever was available, no approval, required no restrictions. Dunbar thought feeding people on the clock was charity, Linda said when he brought it to her. Dunbar was wrong about a lot of things. People cannot do good work when they are hungry. That is not generosity, that is basic operations. She looked at him for a moment. "Say that exactly like that in the staff meeting," she said. "Not the part about Dunbar. The second part." He did. Sandra, in the back of the room, wrote something in the small notebook she had started carrying. The scheduling overhaul went into effect on day 16. Caleb spent an entire evening redesigning the rotation, no more than 3 consecutive closing shifts per person, 2 guaranteed days off weekly. The whole system written clearly and posted in the break room where anyone could read and verify it. Brent studied the new schedule when it went up. He stood in front of it for almost a full minute. "Fair is different from what I'm used to," he said, and walked away. But he showed up on time the next day and did not test anything, which in Brent's operating language was a form of acknowledgement. Sandra began sitting in on the morning management walkthroughs on day 18 quietly, without drawing attention to it, standing slightly to the side and watching. Caleb noticed and said nothing. Linda noticed and mentioned it to him that evening. "She asked me if it was all right to observe," Linda said. "I said yes. She did not ask me anything else. She is learning on her own initiative without being asked." A pause. "You said something to her." "I asked her what she actually wanted," Caleb said. "Nobody had ever asked her that before." Linda was quiet for a moment. "I want you to think about what we do with that." The harder conversation came on a day 24. Sandra found him in the supply room during a quiet stretch of the afternoon. Her voice was direct in the way of someone who has been building toward a question for a while and has finally decided to ask it. 4 years, she said. 4 years of consistent reviews, never a write-up, 2 regional assessors who told me I had management potential. And you are here after 11 weeks. She held his gaze. I need you to be honest with me about why. It is not fair, Caleb said. What happened to me is not fair to you or to anyone else who has put in the time here. I cannot change that. He met her eyes. What I can do is make sure that starting now the door you have been standing in front of for 4 years is actually open. Not as a gesture, as a real thing. He paused. You have been learning the opening walkthroughs for the past week. Keep going. Come to me in 60 days and show me what you have learned. I am not handing you anything. I am telling you the path is real. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, 60 days, and walked out. That evening, Linda and Caleb sat in the office going over the month's numbers. She is going to be ready for assistant manager before spring, Linda said. I know. I want to be the one to tell her when the time comes. Linda said it quietly, but clearly. She has been here longer than you have. When she gets that news, it should come from someone who has been watching her for the full 4 years, not just 2 months. Caleb looked at her. That is the right call. Absolutely. Linda nodded once. Then she turned the laptop toward him. Satisfaction. Scores up 14%. Turnover at 0 for the month. Food waste down 6%. Revenue up 4%. Real numbers grounded in real changes. Nothing inflated. Margaret is coming on Friday, Linda said. I know. What are you going to tell her? Linda was quiet for a moment, organizing her words with the same deliberateness she organized everything. I am going to tell her that you have worked harder than any new manager I have seen, that you have made this building concretely better for the people who work in it, and that I was wrong about you. She paused. I am also going to tell her that Sandra needs to be on a formal development track starting next month, and that the Employee Support Fund needs to be communicated to every new hire at onboarding, not buried in a folder. She looked at him. Because you are not the only person who has ever walked through those doors with a situation like yours. And the next person should not have to wait for the owner to show up before they find out help exists. Caleb looked at her for a moment. Thank you, Linda. Don't thank me. I'm doing my job. But something in her expression had shifted, something that had moved past professional respect into something warmer and more real. Now go home. It is 6:43 and Danny is at Gloria's. Margaret arrived on a Friday, during the lunch rush, which was exactly what she had intended. She sat in the corner booth and watched. Caleb moved through the controlled chaos with quiet, specific authority. Not loud, not dramatic. He did not need volume to redirect things. When Earl fell behind on a run of orders, Caleb was at the grill without being summoned. When a table situation escalated over wait times, Caleb handled it with an apology and a concrete solution before Linda had registered the developing problem. When 2 servers had a moment of friction over a table assignment, Caleb said something brief and low, and the friction dissolved. He also made a mistake. He directed a food runner to the wrong table, caught it 30 seconds later, corrected it himself, apologized to both the runner and the customer, and moved on without visible distress. Margaret noted this carefully. Managers who absorb their own errors cleanly and keep moving are rarer and more valuable than managers who are simply good when everything is going right. After the rush died back, Caleb came to the booth and sat across from her. How do you think it went? She asked. Better than day one in most ways. I made one routing error today and I miscounted a section of inventory this morning and had to redo the whole count. He said both things without apology and without performance. The staff covers things proactively now without being asked. 6 weeks ago, nobody was doing that. Linda's assessment matches yours, Margaret said. She also told me about Sandra and about the onboarding communication gap with the support fund. She paused. That second one is an important catch. It should have been caught a long time ago, Caleb said. By me, by anyone. If the fund exists and nobody knows about it, it might as well not exist. Agreed. We are fixing it company-wide starting this month. Margaret folded her hands on the table. As of today, your position is permanent, with full compensation and benefits as agreed. Congratulations. The relief that moved through his face was brief and quickly composed, but she caught it. Thank you. He was quiet for a moment. Then, there is a business management course at the community college, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. 7 to 9. I have been looking at it for 2 weeks. He said it carefully, like something he had been holding at a careful distance. I think I want to register. Margaret looked at him. There was something different in the way he said it. Not the flat pragmatism of someone checking a box, but something more tentative and more real. Something that looked like actual wanting. Tell me what you are thinking, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Danny asked me last week what college was. I told him it was where you go to learn things you want to spend your life doing. He cleared his throat. He said you should go, Caleb. You already know how to take care of me. A pause. He is 7 years old. Yes, he is right though. Something moved through Caleb's expression, grief and love, and the particular tenderness of someone who has found the person they would do absolutely anything for. I set it down because I had to. That was the right call and I would make it again. But I do not have to keep it set down forever. He looked at the table briefly, then back up. I think I have been treating not wanting things as a form of loyalty to him. Like, if I want things for myself, it means I am not fully committed to him. He paused. I do not think that is actually true. It is not, Margaret said. Eleanor Marsh told me something once that I did not believe until I was 40. She said taking care of yourself is not separate from taking care of the people who depend on you. It is the same thing. You cannot give what you do not have. Caleb was quiet for a moment. My mother used to say something similar. She said you show up for people better when you are also showing up for yourself. She was right. Margaret paused. Register for the course. Linda will cover Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I will confirm that with her today. He registered from his phone that same evening, sitting at the kitchen table after Danny was asleep. He looked at the confirmation screen for a long time. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing at all. He thought about the withdrawal letters he had written in April, sitting at this same table, and about the version of himself that had written them, the version that had made the only call available to him, and had not looked back, because looking back was a luxury he could not afford. He thought about Danny saying, you already know how to take care of me. He closed the confirmation screen and went to check on his brother. Danny was asleep with the Carnotaurus tucked under one arm, and the drawing of Professor in the graduation cap on the nightstand, where he could see it when he woke up. Caleb stood in the doorway for a moment, in the way he had learned to do in April, just to make sure the world was still in order. Then he went to bed. 9 months into Caleb's tenure, 9 months during which the diner's scores had climbed steadily, Sandra had formally begun a management development track under Linda's mentorship, and Danny had developed strong and well-reasoned opinions about the correct cheese-to-bread ratio in a grilled cheese sandwich. Margaret Holloway's phone rang at 11:52 at night. She answered on the second ring. Ms. Holloway, this is the charge nurse at Mercy General in Charlotte. We have an Evelyn Holloway here. You are listed as her emergency contact. She is stable, but she is asking for you. Margaret was in the air by 6 the next morning. Evelyn Holloway was 82 years old, sharp-tongued, sharper-minded, with the particular fearlessness of a woman who had spent 8 decades saying exactly what she thought, to exactly who needed to hear it, and had made peace with the consequences. She had been living independently in Charlotte, near Margaret's brother's family for 3 years, and she had been doing exactly as well as anyone who knew her would expect, stubbornly and entirely on her own terms. The cardiac event was described by 3 different doctors as significant, but not catastrophic. Evelyn described it as an inconvenience and wanted to know when she could go home. The monitoring equipment stays, Margaret said the second afternoon. I am not a science experiment. You are my mother. The monitoring stays. Evelyn deployed the look that had ended arguments for 50 years. You are going to hover. I am going to be here. Those are different things. In practice, they are exactly the same thing. Mom, fine, which from Evelyn was the closest thing to concession available. Margaret managed the company remotely. From Charlotte, once daily check-ins with Barbara available for anything requiring direct attention, trusting her team for everything that did not. She had built systems for exactly this kind of absence. She was not going to pretend she had not built them. But by the end of the second week, there were nights when the fear that lived at the edges of the daytime was harder to keep contained, and she found herself calling Caleb after his closing shift checks, ostensibly for diner updates, which were so consistently good they barely required calls. How is she really? He asked one night. He asked it the way he asked everything important quietly, without the performance of sympathy, as though he genuinely wanted to know and was prepared to hear the actual answer. She is stubborn about everything she can control and frightened about everything she cannot, which she would never say out loud. Margaret looked out the hospital waiting room window at the parking structure, watching someone you have always seen as completely capable fight to do things that used to be simple. "I know that," Caleb said, and she heard in his voice that he did not borrowed from a safe distance, but recognized from direct, recent experience. "Tell me how you got through it," she said. "Those first months after March." He was quiet for a moment. "I did not always. There were nights I sat in Danny's doorway for an hour because I needed to watch him breathing. I forgot groceries one week, and we had cereal for 3 dinners in a row, and I did not even notice until Danny asked why." A pause. "What helped was accepting what I actually could not do. I could not bring them back. I could not make it hurt less for Danny. All I could do was be there every day, steady the same, so he knew that what was still standing was still standing." Another pause. "Your mother needs you to be in the room, not to fix it, not to solve it from a distance, just to be there. That is the whole job." "You are right. And Ms. Holloway, the diner, is genuinely covered. Linda and Sandra and Earl have this completely in hand. You are allowed to just be her daughter right now. That is enough." They talked several times a week after that. Sometimes about Evelyn's slow, incremental progress, 3 steps with the walker, then 5, then 8. Sometimes about Danny, who had appointed himself Gloria's official kitchen assistant and had achieved what Gloria called an impressive beginner's proficiency with scrambled eggs. Sometimes about the diner. Sometimes about nothing much at all. Small, ordinary things that were easy to talk about when everything else was heavy. On one of those late calls, sitting in the quiet of the hospital corridor while Evelyn slept, Margaret said something she had not planned to say. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The afternoon you came into the diner with Danny. When you turned down the position, you said you were afraid that if you took on more and failed, Danny would lose the one stable thing he still had." She paused. "Do you still feel that way?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Less," he said. "Not gone, but less. It is quieter now." A pause. "Danny told me something a few weeks ago. He said, 'When work is going good, Caleb, dinner is better.' And I thought he is right. He notices. It shows up at dinner somehow, the quality of the day." A longer pause. "I think I am starting to understand that taking care of myself is part of taking care of him. I am still learning that, but I think it is true." "Eleanor told me the same thing when I was 22, Margaret said. "I did not believe her until I was almost 40. You are ahead of schedule." Evelyn went home to Charlotte 7 weeks after the cardiac event. Her own apartment, her own terms, a modified diet, 3 new medications, and a medical alert device she had agreed to wear after Margaret pointed out with some heat that it was a very small price for the preservation of her independence. "Persuasive," Evelyn said, settled back in her own armchair with an expression of profound satisfaction. "You get that from me. I know I do. Good. Then you know I am right when I tell you to go home." The look, the one that had ended arguments for 5 decades, deployed now with full deliberate force. "I am healing, not dying. Go do what you are needed for. Trust the people you have built. That is what building people is for." Margaret flew back to Atlanta on a Thursday. She was thinner worn at the edges, moving with the careful energy of someone who has been running on reserves and knows it. But her mother was alive and recovering and stubbornly, completely herself, and that was what mattered. Her first call from the car at the airport was to Caleb. "I am back. Tell me where things stand." "Everything is good. But come in person, I have something to show you." Margaret walked into Clayton's diner on a Wednesday afternoon, 10 months after she had first sat in the corner booth in a Goodwill jacket and walked in as herself. Earl looked up from the pass-through and nodded. In Margaret's private translation guide, this meant, "Things are good in here. I think you know it, and I am glad." Sandra moved through the dining room floor with the confident, specific ease of someone who had been practicing leadership for months and had recently stopped practicing and simply started doing it. Linda had told Margaret on the phone the previous week that Sandra had run a full Saturday service on her own when Linda had a family emergency and had not called once to ask a question she could have answered herself. "She is ready," Linda had said. "Not in 3 months, now, or close enough that the difference does not matter." Say, Linda came out of the office when she heard the door, and her expression, when she saw Margaret, was the expression of someone who has been waiting to say something and has decided the time is now. "Before you go in with Caleb," Linda said, "I need to tell you something." Margaret stopped. "Go ahead." "When you called me after the promotion decision and asked me to give him a fair chance, I agreed, but I did not mean it. I meant I would watch and document and prove you wrong." Linda said it plainly, with no apology for the honesty. What actually happened was that he made it impossible to want him to fail. Not because he was perfect. He made real mistakes, and he owned every single one of them without drama or excuse. But because he cared about getting it right for the right reasons. He cared about the people in this building, not just the position. She paused. And he saw things that I had stopped seeing, not because I wasn't capable of seeing them, because I had been here long enough that I had started to accept them as fixed. He walked in and saw them as problems that could be solved. Another pause. "I am glad you made the call you made. I did not expect to say that, and I mean it completely." "Thank you for telling me," Margaret said. "There is one more thing." Linda straightened slightly. "I recommended him for the regional role, to you in writing last week, through Barbara. I wanted it on record that the recommendation was mine, not just yours, because when he succeeds at it, and he will, I want it documented that the people who worked with him every day saw it coming." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "I received that recommendation. It mattered." "Good." Linda gestured toward the office. "He is in there. He has been here since 5:15. Caleb was at the desk with a laptop and a presentation he had been building. Margaret realized within the first 2 minutes, for the entire time she had been in Charlotte, he had looked with the same eyes he had used to look at Clayton's, at 4 other Holloway locations in the region. He had found the same patterns managers, who had stopped seeing their staff as people with lives outside the building, employees, who had stopped believing anyone was paying attention, systems that created problems instead of solving them. He had specific data. He had specific proposed interventions. He had visited 3 of the 4 locations and could describe what he had seen with the particular precision of someone who had recently learned, through direct experience, the difference between a struggling restaurant and a functioning one. "What do you want to do about it?" Margaret asked. 5 locations total, including Clayton's under Linda as full manager, with official title and full compensation, which I understand is already processed. He met her eyes. 6 months. Give me regional responsibility, and I will apply what we have built here. I will keep taking my courses. I have completed the introductory business management course, and I am registered for 2 more in the spring. I am not asking to skip the learning. I am asking to do it alongside the work the way I have been doing it. Margaret studied the presentation. She studied him, 18 years old still, birthday not until April, sitting across from her with a regional management proposal, backed by 10 months of measurable results, and the clearest instinct for organizational culture she had encountered in 27 years of running restaurants. She thought about Eleanor Marsh, about what it meant to bet on someone, about how the only way to honor that kind of bet was to make it into something worth having made. She thought about Evelyn in her own armchair saying, "Trust the people you have built. That is what building people is for." She thought about Linda Crawford, who had called her over the weekend and said, "I recommended him. I want it on record." 5 locations, Margaret said. 6 months to start. You report to me directly. We talk every week. If something is not working, I hear about it before it becomes a problem, not after. Agreed. You keep taking the courses. Already registered. What about Danny longer hours? Some travel. What does that actually look like for him? He had anticipated this. Gloria and I talked about extended hours on travel days. She is willing, and the childcare fund covers it. Danny is stable. He has school, he has friends, he has Gloria, and Professor. A slight pause. He told me last month he wants to work in restaurants when he grows up. Specifically, he wants to be my assistant. Margaret laughed, the real kind, uncomplicated. Then, we have a deal. She extended her hand. Congratulations, Regional Manager Brooks. He shook it. The look on his face was the look she remembered from Eleanor's hotel in Chattanooga, the look of someone being handed something real and true that they still cannot quite fully believe is meant for them. "Thank you," he said, "for all of it." "Thank Eleanor Marsh," Margaret said. "I am passing it forward. Now you do the same." Linda appeared in the doorway. She had, Margaret realized, been there for the last few minutes. "So," Linda said, looking at Caleb with the expression of someone who has something to say and has decided to say it. "I recommended you for this, officially. I want you to know that." Caleb looked at her. Something moved through his face. "I know," he said. "Barbara told me." "Good." Linda paused. "Do not make me regret it." "I won't." "I know you won't," she said. And for the first time since he had walked into the building 10 months ago, Linda Crawford smiled at him fully, without reservation, the smile of someone who has decided something and is at peace with the decision. Then she straightened up and went back to work because there was a restaurant to run, and she had always been the kind of person who ran it. 15 months after Margaret Holloway had sat in a corner booth watching a boy cover 7 tables alone in the rain, she drove into the parking lot of Clayton's Diner on a clear November morning and sat in the car for a moment before going in. The neon sign in the window had been fixed. Caleb had submitted the work order on his 4th day, which was the first time she had understood that he was paying attention to everything. The parking lot had been repaved. The flower boxes under the front windows, Linda's contribution, were going to rust brown and gold with late-season marigolds, the last color before winter. Small things. The kind that did not appear in reports, but that you noticed when you were paying attention. Inside the diner ran the way. A well-run place runs not with the nervous energy of a restaurant performing for observers, but with the quiet, assured efficiency of a place where people know their work and believe it matters and trust that the person beside them is going to do their part. Earl looked up from the pass-through and nodded. "Things are good in here." She had long since stopped needing to translate. Sandra was working the floor as assistant manager, official compensation effective 3 weeks ago. She moved with the confident authority of someone who had been preparing for this for 4 years, without knowing that the preparation was counting. She caught Margaret's eye from across the room and gave her a brief, professional nod that contained, if you knew how to read it, a great deal of quiet satisfaction. Linda came out of the back with a tablet and the focused calm of someone who is responsible for something and takes that responsibility seriously. "He has been here since 5:20, she said. "I keep telling him he does not have to be." "Does he listen?" "Not even slightly." She almost smiled. The Eastfield manager called him at 9 last night with a scheduling question that could have waited until morning. He talked her through it for 40 minutes. A pause. "He told me afterward that she needed to talk it through, not just get the answer. That the 40 minutes was the point." Linda looked at Margaret steadily. "He is good at this. Better than I expected him to be, and I expected him to be good." "I know," Margaret said. "I know you know." "I wanted to say it out loud anyway." Linda went back to her tablet. "He is in the office." Caleb came out from the back with the regional morning reports and the Carnotaurus on his keychain, Danny's permanent good luck loan, transferred formally about 6 months ago, with the gravity appropriate to a 7-year-old making a significant gift, and the particular focused calm of someone who has learned that problems are manageable if you see them early enough. "Eastfield location," he said, settling across from her. "Satisfaction up 24% since I started with them in June. 1 voluntary departure in 4 months. She went back to school, we wrote her a reference, and Linda called her former professor to put in a word. Manager Jim Riley has changed. Not perfectly. He still defaults to his old habits when he is under pressure, and we are working on that specifically. But he told me last month that he did not know he had been managing through fear until he saw what managing without it looked like." He turned to the next screen. "Clearwater is slower. The issues there go deeper. I have been honest with you in every weekly call about exactly where it stands, and I am being honest. Now, it needs more time and a different approach than the other locations. I have a specific plan I want to walk you through." "Show me." He did. It was specific, realistic, and showed clear evidence of having learned from what had not worked in the first 2 months. It was also, she noticed, built around the people at that location, their specific situations, their specific obstacles, their specific potential, rather than around an abstract management system. "Your courses," she said when he finished. "Finished business law with a B+, financial management with an A-." A pause, and something moved through his expression, the quiet, grounded satisfaction of someone who has done something they actually wanted to do. "The financial management professor asked me after the final what I was planning to do with the degree. I told him I was already doing it. He said that was unusual. Another pause. I told him most things worth doing are unusual at first. Margaret looked around the diner, Sandra on the floor, Earl at the grill, the repaired booths and the clean floor and the schedule posted, clearly in the break room where anyone could read it. She thought about the first morning she had sat in this corner booth in a Goodwill jacket, watching a boy cover 7 tables in the rain and try not to cry, and she thought about the distance between that morning and this one. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "Of course." Eleanor Marsh. Not the story I know the story. What was she actually like as a person? Margaret considered this carefully. It was not a question people usually asked. "Practical," she said finally. "That is the word I keep coming back to." She was not sentimental about helping people. She did not make speeches about it. She did not make you feel like a project. She just saw a situation and decided to act on what she believed without making a production of it. She paused. She was funny in a dry way that you almost missed. She had opinions about everything and was usually right, which she was well aware of. And she used to say that the real test of what you believe is what you do at 2 in the morning when nobody is watching and there is nothing in it for you. Margaret looked at him steadily. She found me at 2 in the morning and acted on what she believed. You do the same thing. I have noticed it. I learned it from my parents, he said. I know. She would have liked them. I think so too. He looked at the tablet, then set it down. I want to talk about what comes next. Not immediately. I know I have been in this role for 5 months. But I want to start thinking out loud with you. Go ahead. The patterns I keep finding: managers who never learn to see their employees as people with full lives outside the building. Most of them are not bad people. They were never taught to see differently. They were given operational training and told that was management. He chose his words carefully. What if we built something that addressed that from the beginning, not a manual? A real training program for every new manager across all Holloway locations, built around the actual philosophy, not just the procedures. How to see problems before they become crises. How to be the kind of manager that Eleanor was. How to make the employee support fund the first thing a new employee learns about, not something they discover by accident when they are already in crisis. A pause. I have been thinking about it since month 2. I have a draft outline. Bring it to me in January, Margaret said. We will look at what it would actually take to build. She held his gaze. That is the right idea. That is exactly the kind of thinking I need from you. After she left, Caleb sat in the office for a few minutes. He called Danny. Caleb. Bright and clear and entirely himself. Gloria, let me make the whole breakfast today. Eggs, toast, everything. She said I am a natural. I know you are. She said the same thing about you, that you are a natural at your job. Caleb paused. She said that this morning. She said your brother is a natural at taking care of people. And I said, I know. He has always been like that. A pause. And Caleb could hear Danny considering whether this next part was worth saying. I told her he learned it from Mom and Dad. The office was very quiet for a moment. That is right, Caleb said. That is exactly right. I know, Danny said simply, with the straightforward confidence of someone who has decided that some things are just true and do not need to be argued about. Are you coming at 6:30? 6:30. Tell Professor I said hello. He does not care, Danny said cheerfully. But I will tell him anyway. After he hung up, Caleb sat for another moment and then opened his laptop and pulled up the draft document he had been working on for 3 months. What we actually believe. Management Training Program, Draft 3. He had been revising it since October. Each draft was better than the last, more specific, more grounded, less theoretical. He read back through the last 2 pages, made a change, read it again. Outside the small office window, he could see a stretch of the parking lot, and beyond it, the street. Ordinary traffic, ordinary people moving through an ordinary November morning. A woman walked past, pushing a stroller. A delivery truck idled at the corner. An old man sat on the bench by the bus stop with a paper bag on his lap, watching the traffic with the patient attention of someone who finds the ordinary world interesting and sufficient. All of it the texture of a day. All of it ordinary and irreplaceable. He thought about a morning 15 months ago walking east in the rain, with Danny pressed against his shoulder, soaked through, fired, with nothing left that looked like a next step. He thought about a woman in a Goodwill jacket, sitting in a corner booth, watching, deciding something. He thought about Eleanor Marsh in a bus terminal in Chattanooga, pressing a warm mug into a 17-year-old's cold hands and saying, "All you need is one person willing to bet on you." He thought about his father, who had believed your real character was what you did when nothing was in it for you. He thought about his mother, who had believed the whole foundation was showing up consistently and without excuses for the people who needed you. He thought about Danny saying he has always been like that, with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who knows a true thing and sees no reason to dress it up. Caleb set his hands on the keyboard. One idea at a time, one person at a time. One chance passed forward to someone who would pass it forward to someone else. The ripple moving outward through water. You could never see the full edge of touching shores. You would never know. That was the real work. It had always been the real work. And Caleb Brooks, 18 years old, 19 in the spring, Big Brother regional manager, business student, son of Thomas and Renee, who had believed in character and in showing up, was only just beginning to understand how far it could go. He began to write Billionaire. Sometimes the moments that change a life don't arrive with fanfare. They appear quietly on an ordinary morning, in an ordinary place, when someone chooses to see what others overlook. That day in a small diner, Margaret could have finished her coffee and walked away. Caleb could have hidden his struggle a little longer. But one decision to look closer, and one act of courage to keep showing up for someone you love, changed the course of two lives. Kindness doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like a stranger believing in you when the world has grown quiet. Sometimes it's an older sister, a mentor, or a business owner choosing to open a door instead of turning away. And the beautiful truth is this: when one person is given a chance, the chance rarely stops with them. It moves forward, touching lives we may never even see. If this story touched you today, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to Memory Stories, and share it with someone who might need a little hope right now. And in the comments, tell us who was the person who believed in you when you needed it most.